gives me a real pleasure to welcome the special representative for the Sahel, Emanuela Claudia Del Re here. Welcome. Emanuela Del Re is since number 21 special representative, but he has a long and distinguished career in various institutions, especially in the Italian government, 2 times deputy foreign minister in the Conte times, Conte 1 and Conte 2, but also as a member of parliament for the Versailles movement for some time. And what is even closer to my heart here at the Diplomatic Academy is she is a distinguished academic sociologist, expert in international affairs, expert in all conflict areas that we are discussing here regularly, from the Balkans to the Caucasus, especially also to Africa. And she has a long list of publications and the experience of talking at universities, European ones, Italian ones, and also writing up about these aspects. And we asked her not only to describe what at the moment the European Union is thinking about Sahel and how they are acting and how the response to developments in the last few months can be seen from the European Union perspective. But we asked her a special question, what is the Russian influence meaning to the Sahel? And there are areas, and we know there are always areas of interpretations. Some say we shouldn't mind, the Europeans shouldn't mind. We always overestimate the might of the Russians. Others say no, there is a strategic interest, and Mr. Putin is very cleverly using the problems that we have, calling it via the voice of Mr. Lavrov as a French colonialism or European colonialism that they have to react to, and especially using a lot of disinformation possibilities that we have nowadays in the region. So there is a lot to discuss actually about the real influence and impact of the Russian engagement in the Sahel, and I guess it will go also beyond Russia, maybe a little bit to China. Your experience about how the Chinese influence in the Sahel region. We agreed that Mrs. Del Re will speak for up to half an hour before we open the discussion here then. Because it's not just about the rules, because we are live also online. So I don't know how many will follow us there, but it will be then also recorded and it can be reviewed anytime. So please be aware that Mr. Putin will listen into what you have to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's such an honor to be introduced by you, and I want to thank you for your kind words, and it's an honor for me to be in front of such a distinguished audience, of course. And I'm also honored by the fact that I am allowed to talk about a topic which is absolutely very important, but unfortunately not very present on our journals in Europe in general, I would say. So it is really a great opportunity. I just want to tell you that I am in Vienna because I am visiting all the capitals of the European Union. I represent 27 member states, and therefore I go to every capital. So far I've visited 13, I think, including Vienna, because it is important for me to bring my own perspective at political level and also, of course, share it with the member states and listen to their perspective as well. Yesterday, I had a very long conversation with your Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Austria. And of course, it was a very important conversation because Austria confirmed through his words its will to remain engaged in the region. The fact that they understand the importance of the region in strategic terms and also in a future perspective, long-term perspective. I also spoke at the Parliament with the Foreign Affairs Committee, which was another very enriching conversation. I found that the members of the Parliament very sensitive to the issue and very well updated. And we discussed again the major issues, and in particular, of course, not only the general situation, but the Austrian position on the Sahel, which is reassuring for me because Austria is an ally in the sense that I am convinced, strongly convinced, that we need to remain engaged. And this means that, of course, when Austria says that understands the importance of the region, wants to remain engaged, and wants to send an important political message, for me is music, absolutely music, and in line with the tradition of Austria, of course. I say this to you because when we talk about the Sahel, usually I describe the region as the real southern border of Europe. And there is a reason why I say that, because everything that happens in the Sahel has a huge impact on our continent. Of course, we immediately think about the security, but I would also say that there are movements of people, there are an enormous amount of dynamics. Of course, unfortunately, terrorism and criminality, but also a food crisis that is going to become even more severe. There are climate problems and all the things related. So you can imagine how important it is to help this region to come out of this situation and find a stability. So the position of Austria for me is particularly significant. We discussed the fact that you don't invest immense amounts of money, but it is important, your message at political level, because it goes directly to the rest of the member states, and this makes a difference. Considering that never in history there has been so much attention towards the Sahel from the European Union as there is today, meaning that 27 member states, from the raw political perspective, from the raw geographical positions, they're all focusing on the Sahel, which is the most important dossier on the table of the European Union after Ukraine, of course, because Ukraine is now for us the priority, absolute priority. I made this introduction because I think I have to do it. Why am I here? I'm here because of this, and thank you, Austria, for being such a really far-sighted country, as you have always been. Regarding Russia, it is also related, of course, to the position of Austria and all the other member states. Russia, it's a strange country, as you very well know. At the moment in Africa, Russia is investing a lot in political terms, although it has never been successful in Africa. Russia tried since decades, because Russia is not arrived yesterday, it's present in the region since a long time, in particular in the Sahel, but in the whole of Africa. Russia has tried to influence political processes. They always failed. They tried in Mozambique, for instance, and they failed because the Mozambicans are not stupid. So we were rapid enough as European Union to make an alternative proposal. They chose us. Just to give you an example. They tried elsewhere. They didn't succeed because they are not really focusing on political processes. They want to get what they can get. For instance, of course, natural resources and exploitation of natural resources. They want to have areas of influence which are based on, in my view, not very consistent arguments. Because in the end, it is a question of offering minimum, but the minimum for poor countries like the countries of Africa in general, it's still something on which they can count. And this is the reason why, for instance, many countries of Africa didn't vote in favor of the UN resolutions against Russia, because they were afraid of losing the minimum amount of things that Russia was providing. So it's really a sort of blackmailing. Regarding the Sahel, at the moment, Russia is particularly important for us because they have found in the Sahel a big opportunity to exercise their power. It is a power that is based on a very weak arguments and very weak also instruments, because they are not really building a system, but they are trying to exploit as much as possible, for instance, tools of warfare such as disinformation, the famous disinformatia. It doesn't cost much, but it has a strong effect. At the same time, they are trying to elude some of the countries, in particular Mali and Burkina Faso, that they will support them militarily. We are hesitating. We stopped, as European Union, our support to Mali because we decided that given that Russia was present with its famous, notorious actually, Wagner group, we could not continue to implement our missions in the country. In Burkina Faso, Wagner Group is not present, but Russia is trying to elude the country by sending some airplanes, military airplanes, for instance, or other little things to make them think that in case they make this choice, they will support them, but it is really not the reality. And the Africans are starting to understand because, of course, they are not unaware of the means of contrast to terrorism and criminality that they need. They know exactly what they need, and if they don't get it, of course, they understand what the system is, especially in terms of Russian strategy to keep the area of influence in the region. Nevertheless, we have to reflect upon these things. We might enhance the weak points of Russia, which are absolutely apparent. We see them, we know them, we have experienced them, but in the end, there is a situation at global level that makes Russia very attractive to African countries. For instance, recently, there was a big conference at the Duma with more than 40 African delegations participating in Russia, of course, in Moscow. This conference was another way of demonstrating that Russia can offer something to Africa. And as I told you, if you are a poor African country, of course, you want to take all the opportunities. And there is a discriminatory element, the fact that the war in Ukraine is not perceived by the Africans in the same way we perceive it. We are trying to pass the message and make them understand that for us, the question of Ukraine is not only a question of a war on our vicinity and that regards only us. It's a question of global order. This is the formula that usually I pass to the presidents of the states of Africa when I speak to them, or even to civil society. It's a question of global order. We are violating, Russia is violating very important laws that protect the planet, not just Europe. And of course, we have to prevent a worsening of the situation. The Africans don't perceive this. This is the very big challenge that we have to overcome in the future. How to pass this message and how to remain a point of reference in these countries. How can we remain the most important reference point for what we have achieved and we consider big achievements at social, political, and economic level? At the moment, we know we are in a multipolar world and therefore we are not alone. When you were asking me, thank you very much, about China as well. China is another actor very active in Africa since many years ago. It's not just a right. China has a very established relationship with Africa. And of course, the relationship is so transparent and so fluid that, of course, if you go to African countries, especially in the Sahel, you see that many things are advancing with China. We don't know all the things. We are not the only ones. So maybe all the ministers in the ministries in the countries of the Sahel have been built by the Chinese. Of course, we don't agree with the strategy of the Chinese because we know that they work on debt, meaning that the countries are strangled by debts and they will have to repay China. But in the meantime, China is present. China is building ministries. We are doing a lot. Of course, the good news comes, because I don't want to be too negative, in the sense that we, as European Union, are still the main partner of the countries of the Sahel. And this, of course, gives us a huge opportunity to contrast the really appetite for influence of Russia. We can contrast it with our money, but this is not enough, because money sometimes is not understood. We think that money is clearly something that is very concrete, but at the same time, money comes, money goes, and it doesn't mean anything when it comes to advancement of situations in countries where security is the main problem. Now, for instance, the only language that counts in the region is weapons, especially for Mali and Burkina Faso, which are the epicenter of all the security phenomena. So you can imagine that money, we invest a lot. We are the main partner of each country, including Mali, because in Mali, for instance, we still have our missions, although they are at the minimum functioning, but we still have 900 million euro of projects ongoing. So it's consistent. But this is not enough. We need to develop another language. We need to be able to contrast the very direct and illusionary discourse, political discourse that Russia puts in place, for instance. Consider that for the European Union, it is vital to concentrate on human rights. Unfortunately, we are the only ones who are still fighting for this. Because China certainly doesn't even know the meaning of the word, because they don't care about labor conditions or human rights. They don't ask them, when they start their projects to respect these elements. Russia is the same. So in the end, we are the barrier against violation of human rights. We are the voice of suffering population. And this obliges us to continue, of course, to affirm our principles, but this, in terms of our image, is not always understood. So we are in a deep crisis at the global level in terms of our credibility, because we think that automatically, given that we are promoting these kind of principles, we are credible and we are the center of the world. If you look at the map of the planisphere, from Africa, things are different. We are not the center of the world. This must make us reflect very clearly, because, of course, when Russia, in the middle of the war, calls for a conference at the Duma with the African countries and 40 countries go, this is a big signal for us. And the same, there will be a huge conference in July, Africa, Russia. It will be, I am sure, even more important. There will be even more participation, because Russia is still very attractive. It's another pole. So do we want these poles to be in contrast with each other? How can we overcome this huge problem? This is something very serious. I don't have the solution, but what I can say is that we have to continue to be by the side of the population of Sahel. We have to insist on being a reference point. We have to insist in investing in the countries of the Sahel, because we have to be present. That's the only thing that we can do. We need to be more visible. We need to invest more, as I said, because in fact, we invest a lot, but we, at the moment, have competitors that might make us our investments appear as not as impacting on the situation in the countries as we actually believe they are. Of course, for us, the keywords are at political level partnership. Consider that we started calling the countries of Africa partners recently. I consider it as sort of a cultural revolution, because until recently, if you think about it, we used to say third countries, developing countries, very far away. It seemed as if they didn't belong to the same planet as us. Now they are partners. Partners is a strong word. It implies an interpersonal relationship in normal language. So partnership is a key word. The other keyword is certainly governance. It's our inspiring principle. And we are right, because if governance is not working, nothing is working in the countries. And this is a reality, unfortunately, in the Sahel, because things are not working properly. They are not able to make the population affirm itself. grow in terms of economic advancement. They are not able to provide education, provide protection at all levels. Why? The situation is precipitating. Of course, Russia is not offering anything. Russia is only selling weapons. It's the main leading seller of arms, but this, of course, doesn't bring development. So you can understand we are in a tricky situation because we cannot imagine that from one moment to the other, Russia will leave its grasp on Africa. We have to be able to become stronger ourselves and more credible, as I said. Consider the presence of Wagner, this notorious group. Why is Wagner used by Russia? There are many theories. I studied it very carefully. I spent all my life in conflict areas on field. So I've seen with my own eyes, warlords and others that work to create disruption and instability. Wagner is present at the moment only in Mali, because we have 5 countries in the Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Mauritania, and Chad. Mauritania is relatively stable because they found a system of securitization of the country which is working. Niger is behaving in a certain way very positively with President Bazoum and its own project for renaissance, because they really want to advance, and of course we all are happy with that, and we find a very good interlocutor and partner in our projects because we really understand each other. Chad is in a difficult transition. There was a bad event in October when during a demonstration many people were killed, and Burkina Faso and Mali are the most problematic countries, because Mali, as you know, had 2 coups d'etat and they called Wagner to protect the population. Burkina Faso is in a desperate situation and is asking for help from us. Going to the Wagner Group and heading towards the conclusion of this first introduction, the Wagner Group is a very good strategy for Russia, because if you think about it, if the Wagner Group behaves badly, and it behaves badly because, for instance, in Mali, the population is starting to realize that they are not protecting the population, they are not obtaining good results in fighting against terrorism, and they are violating human rights. So it's a perfect portrait of the situation. Nevertheless, for Russia, it's a very good liability, because in the end, if Wagner behaves badly and commits big mistakes, Russia is not responsible, because Wagner is not a registered group. So it's Russia in the Sahel, but it's not Russia in the Sahel. So it's independent from the state. So it's a very clever way of putting it, in fact. Of course, we consider the Wagner Group a red line. I remember the first time I met President Goïta of Mali, before the war in Ukraine. There was already this idea in his mind of calling the Wagner Group, especially to protect its own group of putschists. But I told him clearly, I said, listen, if you call Wagner, this will be a red line for the European Union. This will cause an immense consequence. He didn't care at all. He called the Wagner Group. We started changing completely our attitude towards the country. We decided that, for instance, our training mission called EUTM, European Union Training Mission, which had trained more than 18,000 Malian soldiers, could not be continued because we didn't want the Malian soldiers trained by us, also on human rights, for instance, to work for the Wagner Group. So you see, it's a vicious circle that is strangling the country also, because they have suspended everything, and of course they find themselves in a difficult situation. They are illuded that Russia will help them. They voted against the latest UN resolution against Russia, which puts them in a club of 7 countries in the world that voted against this resolution. When I saw the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mali recently in Mali, I said to him, but is this really the image you want to project in the world? you, such a noble country, because Mali is really a noble country with a great history, you want to be associated to a club of people composed of Eritrea, North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, Syria, Nicaragua, and Mali. I said, is this what you want to be seen as? A member of this club? But they said to me, yes, but it's a question of sovereignty. We want to affirm, because they're a proud country, and they thought, why should we be imposed some decision? We want to be free to take our own decisions without thinking that the consequence is you are part of a very negative club. And of course, you are becoming even more subject to Russia and its policies. Of course, to conclude, the policy of Russia is strange, because I remember recently there was a group of Nigerian psychiatrists who got a scholarship from Russia to go to Russia, and somebody was asking me, what can I do to help them? I said, don't ask me, because I don't think it's possible for the European Union absolutely to help these people. Of course, Nigeria can take its own decisions if they want to send the psychiatrist to follow a PhD course in Russia. I don't know what I can think about it. Nevertheless, as you can see, the strategy is to make it appear, the presence of Russia, as an opportunity, which is not. Because as I told you, apart from these little things that Russia is giving, the real strategy is exploit natural resources, do not promote any kind of development, keep the country subject to their influence, and especially isolate the countries, which means that, you know, they break relationships with some other countries. They have, as a consequence, the problems with the European Union, although we insist we remain by the side of the population, we guarantee humanitarian aid all the time. Nevertheless, as I told you, they are very, very capable of creating an illusion, a projected image of themselves, which is not real at all. It's a shadow, but it works, because unfortunately, the situation is very complex. We can talk about the problems of the European Union or how the European Union reacts to all this, whether we are capable of remaining the center of the world for what we think we are, especially for the principles. But I can tell you it's the biggest challenge we have now in this century. I am absolutely convinced of this. And of course, we must not be afraid of an actor like Russia. But we have to be prepared for the future. And this is the moment in which we can really create our own future and make sure that we save the globe, affirming our important principles, because every individual, when it is given the opportunity to experience democracy and freedom, I think has realized his own dreams. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your convincing narrative about the Russian interest and how we can use of disinformation and of the mercenaries they have there. And for also Latinos know that actually the influence is bigger than what they are really investing in this influence. And this may be the case because of some of the mistakes that the West did and does in the Sahel, but not only in the Sahel region. Before I open for discussion, I would relate to what you said. You said we need another language. And you said at the same time, we have to stick to our principles, even globally. I fully agree that these principles are, in the end, will be successful. But when you read journalists, Western journalists talking about the Sahel and the confrontation between Russia, possibly China, and the European Union, they always say that the European Union is a strange animal. They are not willing to decide between the priority of stability and the priority of democracy. And by not being able to decide these principles, they fall in between two stools, and they are neither providing stability nor democracy in the Sahel. What would you answer them? Is this a dilemma with this supporting stability, needing also sometimes to support political leaders who do not share all our democratic values and the principles that we stand for?
One thing is to support, one thing is to keep an open dialogue. So there are two elements. Support is one thing, meaning how can we support President Koita in Mali? Is a putschist. And of course, coup d'etat for us is not acceptable. And of course, we praise the European Union for insisting on the return to constitutional order. We are hoping. We are also, of course, supported in our battle by regional organizations. For instance, ECOWAS, which is the organization for Western Africa, and they also insist on the return to constitutional order. And therefore, this is in line with what you are saying, but in terms of not being able to support President Koita, putschist, but keeping an open dialogue, because anyway we need to continue to pass the messages. So support and dialogue are not the same thing. This is why, for instance, with Mali, we applied the rule that I also promoted with the member states, fermeté sans fermeture. Which means to be firm on our principles, but at the same time don't close the doors, because otherwise how can we regain the connection with this country? So support and dialogue, two different things. I am in favor of continuing to dialogue with all the countries of the Sahel, even these two in particular, most problematic, and I am convinced that despite the fact that our action as European Union, meaning European Union not at bilateral level between single member states and the different countries, we are less visible than others, because our action is based on the will to intervene within the society, to help the society grow by itself, because we are motivated by the principle of ownership. And this is very important for us. We would like, really desperately like, to see these countries be able to act for themselves with our support, because of course we are ready to continue to support the countries economically for projects and so on, but we would like to see this ownership become a reality. So you can understand how complex the situation is, but I am convinced that our action is incredibly important, so much that even though Mali is, of course, a beautiful country. I told you that its position. They continue to say that they want the European Union to be present. I can say this because I see them all the time, I speak to them all the time. They have no problem with the European Union. They would like to continue to see the missions of the European Union working on their territory, because they know that it works.
I love what you say, but you also talked about it. You were speaking about partnership with Africa. I fully agree. We need a partnership. It needs to be defined. It needs to be as symmetrical as possible. But how can you explain that Mr. Borrell, in a meeting with they said there is a garden and there is a jungle? When there's a garden and a jungle, it doesn't sound to me like partnership. I know that he retracted from his words, but still, he uttered these words and he got the reaction to this. And he and others in the European Union also said, we in the European Union have come away from the power of language to the language of power. The language of power includes sometimes also nasty things. Are we ready in the Sahel area to use nasty things? Should we use them? What are we talking about?
But we cannot judge the work of Borrell just by some statements, because of course it's easy to manipulate some statements that have been said maybe in a moment of instinct or something like that. I am number two of Borrell. for the Sahel. And I can tell you that we work together closely. We have participated in many bilaterals. The attitude of Borrell is always of great openness. It's very much respected by the leaders of the Sahel. We are going together to Niger finally because it's very busy everywhere, as you can imagine, in July, I think, July. And of course, Borrell sometimes asks difficult questions because it is necessary also to be frank. I myself am very frank with my African counterparts. We have to be friends. This doesn't mean to be nasty, because, for instance, if somebody tells me a bad word, I don't respond with a bad word. I keep being a good girl. And of course, this would be a trap if you lower your level of education and respect. But it is the moment in which we have to be frank to each other. We have to listen, we have to understand. Of course, there is a difficulty on the part of the European Union still, and I have to be honest on that, to understand that contemporary Africans are different from the image of Africans we had in the past. We have to be contemporary. This is something I always say. It's one of my mantras. I say, give contemporary answers to contemporary questions and use a contemporary language, because contemporary Africans are different from the past. And of course, this is not easy, because sometimes we continue to have in the back of our minds the mentality of being the donors. So we have this unidirectional relationship, donor-beneficiary. At the moment, this is not the case. It's a bidirectional. Donor and beneficiaries, we are both donors and we are both beneficiaries. Because what happens in the Sahel and the work that the Sahelians are doing, which is immense. Imagine to be the president of Niger, a country which is one of the poorest in the world, the lowest index of human development in the world, and you are the president of that country. Your work is incredible, especially in the case of Bazoum. Working to create relationships with all the world, obtaining funds, convincing the European Union to invest even more. Sorry, but this is admirable. We cannot deny that. So we have to change the mentality. Regarding Mr. Borrell, as I told you, he's really doing a great effort. Of course, it's not easy, but we have to judge the all action, not just one word or two that came out.
Absolutely, but words are sometimes very powerful, yes. As we know, unfortunately. The Russian propaganda is normally saying, we can give you support with no strings attached, with no conditions attached. Whereas we in the European Union are always saying there are conditions for our support. Is that the problem?
I don't think so. Actually, I have to tell you, we discussed this with the countries of the Sahel. Of course, they are very concerned with human rights, because in the end, if they want to gain also popular support and convince the public opinion, they have to pass the message that they protect the population. Nevertheless, of course, when it comes to projects, especially dealing with development cooperation, in particular in the field of exploitation of resources and the kind of advantage that would get from letting the actors who are not at all respecting human rights, they see the advantage of just letting it go. For what it regards us, as I told you, they know very well, the countries of the Sahel, including Mali and Burkina, that our support in terms of humanitarian aid is so crucial. It's so fundamental. In a country, for instance, like Burkina Faso, where you have at the moment something like 2 million IDPs, internal displaced persons. It's so important that, of course, they will have to accept our continuous reference to human rights. And apart from anything, we believe in it. I want to tell you that some years ago, I made a study on the Russian diaspora. And I was mentioning writing an essay on an important geopolitical magazine. I said the human rights will be the problems of the 21st century, because I remember distinctively, and there is a video on that Kirill Despolensk, who was at that time the foreign minister of Putin, declared that human rights are universal, but are not applicable to the Chechens. And this was in 2009. Chechens, the population of the Chechens. So the human rights are universal, but they are not applicable to a certain population. So, and this was years ago. So we know what the danger is. This is why we are not abiding to our principles.
But among the problems is that in Mali and Burkina Faso, people are burning flags from France, the US. They're not burning Russian flags. So there seems to be an appeal. Because of what you said, they are sending weapons, they are destabilizing, they are making the groups working against each other in the country. So how can we react to it? Simply by saying that we give you humanitarian support, or is there more to that? Because just saying that one of the truths is that in Africa, 0.1% of recurring investment comes from Russia. Is that enough? Repeating that again and again. So, where do you see the chances really? I know it's a long road you have to take on this, but do you see any positive developments?
Well, again, it depends on the narrative. In the sense that on one hand, it is true, there have been episodes in which the French flag was burnt, and there have been episodes in which there were small demonstrations of pro-Russia people, proclaiming and slogans for Russia against the European Union and in particular France. That is absolutely true. But I have to somehow put it into a concrete dimension, because at the same time, as I said, we, the European Union, we remain the main partner of all the countries of the Sahel. So probably there is a discrepancy between these attitudes. One aspect is some groups that are manipulated, I have to say manipulated, but this system of disinformation trying to promote this idea that the European Union and in particular France are still representing a certain form of colonialism that is in contrast with the aspiration to Pan-Africanism of the countries of the Sahel. On the other hand, the leadership of the countries of the Sahel has studied in France, most of them. There is a very close cultural relationship. There are very important diasporas abroad that are still very significant. I am Italian, for instance, there is a very big 70,000 people diaspora, which I know very well, of Burkina Faso, in the northeast part of Italy, which is one of the richest regions in the world, as well as Malians, many Malians. So you see, it's a very controversial thing. Of course, we have to be careful, always be afraid of the potential negativeness of this phenomenon. But at the same time, put it in the right dimension and continue to work on the fact that we are still the main partner of the countries of the Sahel.
Before I open to the audience, one more question about possibly the US. You didn't talk about the United States of America. Would you agree that the Americans left the region simply and left people asked to fight the Russian and Chinese influence?
I didn't talk about it because I knew the question was coming. It's obvious. Thank you for asking. No, it's absolutely the contrary. I was in Washington in January, I think, and of course I visited the Department of State. I'm always in contact with the Department of State. Tonight I'm going to speak with the Special Envoy of the Department of State at 9:30, and also with the President, Nuland and the others. They are particularly interested in the region. The first political move they made was some time ago, I think in December, when they decided to give, if I'm not mistaken, they decided to give $35 million through the US aid to Mali. As you can understand, I was also Minister of Development Cooperation. When you make a donation for development cooperation, it's a political statement, obviously. And now they are pushing for the European very much to act concretely in both Burkina Faso and Mali, because they have a law, special law, that prevents them from intervening in countries directly and militarily in countries where there has been a coup d'etat. So they cannot work directly in Mali and Burkina Faso, but they are pushing the European Union to be more active in terms of security. They are carrying out activities already. For instance, with the Netherlands, they are forming special forces. There are many activities ongoing, because imagine that the Sahel is a very crowded region, and so many things are going on that it's difficult to keep the pace. If we think that it's a desert, it's not, because it's really very dynamic. And the US is one of the main actors at the moment, absolutely fundamental. I told you, I'm always in contact with that.
The Americans have no interest that the Russians can increase their position in the Sahel. It's obvious. I open for questions, actually. I have already 1, 2, 3. Let's start again.
With a mic or without?
No, you can do it like that. I don't see a mic around.
No, because
there is a mic for
yeah, because it's still if it's still Institute, the Immigration Center of Europe, there is not as close to the Niger, but anyhow, things are getting more and more close to each other. I'm surprised that the US is offering $35 million as we said, to Mali. And I just wonder if it should be more conditions, because we do have the problem not only in Mali now, but also that thing in Sudan, which is not quite in Sahel, but further east, that mercenaries like mercenaries, and mercenaries in Mali, they like Wagner, and now we have it in Sudan, where there's the actual military and also mercenaries fighting against the military with Wagner. And Russia is looking for a nice other place at the Red Sea, for instance, which is very important, south of the Suez Canal. As help is limited, shouldn't one concentrate? You mentioned Niger, they are much more positive. So I just wonder if this conditioning is not it is the right way, because I would think so. And of course, we have a disadvantage, we have no mercenaries, we have no regional. But how is it about Europe? Is it at least united concerning countries like Mali? Because in Libya, the French and the Italians are on different sides. So that's another question.
Would you like to answer individually?
Directly each one. Okay, perfect. Well, conditionality is important. We have been discussing it very much within the 27, because of course, one can say we need to continue to invest in the countries of the Sahel. There was an important meeting on the 23rd of January, a Foreign Affairs Council of the European Union with all the ministers of foreign affairs. Your minister was also the minister of Austria was also there. And Borrell and I spoke, and we asked the 27 to confirm the necessity to remain engaged in the Sahel, and also to start looking at the coastal countries, meaning Benin, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana, because the spillover effect from the epicenter of the phenomenon, especially security issues, Mali and Burkina, are having a spillover effect on the coastal countries, especially in the northern part of the coastal countries. For instance, in Togo, I was in Togo recently, and the flow of refugees has already started towards Togo, and there have been already some attacks. So conditionality is very important to continue to have conditionality. Also because, for instance, regarding Wagner, that's really catch-22 situation. Mali put itself in a tunnel, and I'm sorry to say this because, as I told you, it's a country that I really respect very much. But there are also political situations at a global level that we have to take into consideration. Regarding Burkina Faso, again, a conditionality, because we told them, don't go to Russia if you want our help. Of course, this is all to be built. It's very difficult to talk, let's say, in very lucid ways, because there are always elements that add to the situation or change nuances that we have to take into consideration. Of course, regarding Niger, our conditionality has been simply to be cooperative. But I can tell you that Niger has been cooperative with the European Union and in general with the situation since a long time. So I think that conditionality is a good way of starting. I am not very much in favor of transactional relationships at a global level and especially in diplomacy. Transactional is another thing, meaning I give you something if you give me something in change. I'm sorry, everybody knows I'm not in favor of that. But I am in favor of conditionalities. Apart from anything, you are in Austria. You know the Balkans. I've spent 20 years in the Balkans. Conditionalities, reasonable conditionalities, meaning asking for reforms, respect of certain rules, and so on, worked for the Western Balkans. We all hope that the Western Balkans will soon become a part of the European Union. But anyway, at least the conditionality worked to make these countries contribute with our support to reforms and to improve the situation in the many sectors of their societies. So conditionality, yes, and transaction, no. But regarding the difference within the European Union, yes, there are differences. But it is also true that every country of the European Union, from its own perspective, is convinced of the need to remain engaged in the region. This was confirmed in January. And when I talk about different perspectives, I give you an example. For instance, the Czech Republic. I organized a special envoys meeting in Prague last semester when the Czech Republic has the presidency of the European Union. Well, believe it or not, out of three priorities of the presidency of the Czech Republic, one is the Sahel. Just to give an example, and you might say, well, but there is no geographical proximity. Yes, but in anti-Russian function, for them it's very important to be in the region. And also to create their own personality at the political level, at geopolitical level. This is very important. In fact, the first country that at bilateral level decided to help Burkina Faso in their fight against terrorism is the Czech Republic. Just to give you one example, I can give you many, but just to tell you that the general attitude is, of course, in favor of the support. France has got its own personality. France is very important in the Sahel. These countries still have the CFA, which is the currency called franc, and also, of course, they are very present in the countries. Just to give an example, a French embassy in the countries of the Sahel is composed of something like 70 people. Okay, while, for instance, the embassy of Italy in Bamako, which I opened when I was a vice minister, 5 people, but the same for the others. So they are a huge presence, very important presence. We have to listen to them because they have the experience, the history, the relationships. Of course, when it comes to decisions, anyway, we are 27. So, of course, we take into consideration the position of France, which is fundamental, but we take decisions at the 27 member states level. And I have to tell you that until now, there has been a certain harmony. Discussions, but harmony in the end, we take good decisions altogether.
Yeah, regarding Mali, there were a lot of discussions, and I think the other member countries without France were very helpful to support France for a long time, although France was not so successful in creating a better situation in Mali. And you mentioned the Austrian support. We had up to 70 soldiers supporting the mission in Mali.
Yes, yes.
Also at that time. Yeah, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead. Yes, please.
Yes. Well, thank you for the interesting talk and the emphasis on the need for European Union to be present there. Not only militarily or politically diplomatic, but also in other ways. And you said also it's not enough to give money, but I think one should try to help solve all sorts of problems which are in those countries. Well, with my background as environmental diplomat, I think that I'm not speaking only about climate change, but for instance, the water problems. While I don't think that the limit, the border between Sahel and MENA is so big, exact, there are enormous big water problems, not only caused by climate change, but by sheer use of water and a non-existence of the infrastructure to guarantee the quantity and quality of water. The second point is that one would think of cooperation projects. For instance, many of you, I think, have heard about the desert tech idea to produce through solar power electricity in North Africa and then bring it to Europe. For some reason, it failed or it didn't lead to something. Now, again, there are ideas to produce solar electricity. I think very good idea, but one has to be present there. One has to go there. One has to engage people and so on. Okay, I don't want to talk too much, but I would like to hear your opinion for this extending the way of being present. Thank you.
Well, regarding the European Union, I have to tell you that we have a presence in all sectors. There are very many projects. If you want, we can share with you some information on water and environment and climate change. An immense amount of projects, I have to tell you. Of course, the problem is implementation, as you are saying. Of course, the problem is sustainability, whether we are really able to change the situation permanently or just tackle the problems when they emerge. Unfortunately, I have to tell you that in countries like Burkina and Mali, we are always following with emergency, in the sense that emergency is so serious, especially refugees, IDPs, destruction and other things, that we are more concentrated on emergency rather than concentrating on development cooperation. But we are very active. For water, we have many projects. And I want to tell you just one project that is very important. The Great Green Wall, for instance, is a very big project that intends to create a sort of belt, green belt, that would cross all the countries of the Sahel, very wide and very rich. We have already a lot of money invested on that, and it is a way of contrasting the advancement of the desert and the water problems. Of course, this requires a lot of engagement, as I told you, because until now, I myself have visited many projects in which you have new wells for the communities. There are many things that you can do. But in terms of changing the situation permanently, that is still to come. Regarding electricity, we're mentioning solar panels and other things. Electricity is a huge problem, once again, so the basics are all missing, as you can see. Electricity is one of the major problems because it has an effect on everything, on machinery, technology, connection, internet connection, everything. And of course, this is another project. We have projects ongoing. Consider that the big body of the European Union is also supported by projects at bilateral level. Of course, I went to UNIDO today, which is the UN agency for industrialization, and we were discussing the fact that we need more private investments, we need more entrepreneurs, but of course, until the narrative is so negative and people think that if they go to the region, of course, they would lose their investments because of security problems, it's very difficult to attract investments. So you see, again, it's vicious circle, but we are working very much on that.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. And I'll start to say thanks to the Diplomatic Academy for organizing this session. Although something is missing, we are hearing from one perspective, from a European perspective. The debate would have been more productive for the audience if at your place there were somebody from the Sahel zone to have a kind of contradiction. And again, this brought us to the idea of always trying to infantilize Africa. So you have to speak at our place. Your voice is our voice. And there is one expression we hear here, which I really like, is to talk contemporarily. It's really important. But again, if we talk about the instability of the region and this brilliant talk overshadowing diversion, the impact of the attack of NATO in Libya, which brought the chaos to our countries. I think we have to be very, very objective. Politically, it's difficult, but as a human, we have to recognize some facts. She said, I'm from Mali, I'm the representative of Mali here, right, for the consulate. To say that the Russian partner is protecting Goita, just go to Bamako, from Bamako to all the region, to listen to the people. How much support they have, not from Goita, but from the ideal in breaking to the country. Not here alone. We have 2 million Goita in Mali. I can tell you that really. You may not agree with that. But now my point is, again, how do you, as a sociologist, how do you interpret the idea of sovereignty? Is it talking at the place of people, keeping on infantilizing them, even though they are people who have very high education? This podium is reflecting this. You are speaking for Africa in the name of Africa, and there's no Africa here sitting and giving the perspective of Africa. And this has been missing in the cooperation between Europe and Africa for over 70 years. I don't pretend to monopolize it, but I note a lot of things which I think you have to rethink your narrative about Mali. It's talking about Burkina Faso, but Mali, we know where we want to go. 9 years of the presence of France and Europe trying to fight terrorism. At the beginning, it was 20% of the country under the control of the terrorists. But by the end of the 9 years, it was almost 70%. What were this region doing in this country? And now, the narrative we are hearing now is that human rights. Are we going to see the same thing used by the term democracy for domination by trying to put forward human rights? Just to try to have political pressure on the country. Because, to finish, there is a high level of untrust between those countries and Europe, a very high level. Europe is not an enemy of Africa. Nevertheless, there is a time now that you have to let people decide about their own political perspective. I think this is not difficult.
Thank you very much. I'm not talking on behalf of Africa. I'm talking on behalf of the European Union, I'm talking on behalf of the European Union. I'm not talking on behalf of Africa. I'm telling you and sharing with you my experiences with the Africans with whom I have constant contacts all the time. But I'm not speaking on behalf of Africa. Africa must speak for itself. And I have to tell you that in this moment, when we were talking about contemporary attitude, luckily enough, there are very good signs. Because, for instance, we had the African Union, European Union summit last year. Recently, we had the European Union ECOWAS CEDEAO meeting in Brussels. I was also present. I don't know, President Issoufou came to visit us just before Easter. Not to mention Al-Ghazouani, not to mention Diop, not to mention many visits, many interlocutions, many opportunities to exchange. So I speak on behalf of the European Union and I share my views. The Africans speak for themselves. Regarding the issue of sovereignty, it is a very big issue. I know for the Malians in particular, this is something that is recurring all the time in all our discourses. I have to tell you that as regards the European Union, we never put in doubt the sovereignty of the country, of Mali. And in fact, I have to tell you regarding the European Union, and in fact, we take decisions with the Malians, but I'm talking also regarding and referring to my conversations with Diop, with Guarguet, with Maiga, with Goïta. I can tell you that we never put in question the sovereignty of Mali, so much that we are deciding with them the destiny of our missions and other things, because we discuss the issues. We also listen to the instances of Mali. I know that regarding MINUSMA, which is the mission of the United Nations, there is an ongoing discussion on that. So in the end, of course, I agree with you. There is a lot of popular support for Goïta, absolutely. And I don't know whether he will run for the elections, maybe yes, maybe not, but there is a strong popular support. We are not interfering with that. What we are requesting is to be sure to be able to see the end of the transition, as also ECOWAS asked for, and to be sure that we are interlocuting with a permanent, legitimate leadership that can be our partner in our decisions. This is why we continue to keep the door open, as you know, myself, I always do that. And this is why, of course, we want to continue to work on a partnership, which is the reality, because as I told you, we still have 900 million of projects ongoing in the country, which means that we never left. We, of course, changed some aspects because of the situation with Wagner, but that is understandable because we have our own position, you have your own position, and that is to be accepted.
Respected.
Yeah, respected, but of course, we mentioned that we said clearly that if we had made a certain choice, it would have had consequences for us, because there are things that we cannot accept, and this is what the situation is now. But regarding contemporary attitude, I told you we are changing in the sense that we are trying to be more open to understanding. It's not easy for us. I told you, it's not easy, also because it's another culture, it's another mentality, but the change, I have to admit, is starting. It has started, I think, in the last few years, first of all with the concept of partnership, with the idea of ownership. I told you, we would like the Africans to do things by themselves. Of course, we are ready to help, we understand. If a country is in difficulty, we are ready. But, of course, ownership is our principle, I tell you, and everybody knows. This is why, luckily enough, the European Union is still the main partner of all the countries of the Sahel, because we are credible in this sense.
Just can we discuss?
It was mentioned that the sense of Libya
Yes,
was very important for the lack of trust in some African countries, and that is true. That was not the full success story of European Community of Security, and Russians are using this, as we know.
Well, I don't know if Russia is using it, because we are capable to judge this. We can see the reality, and whether you believe or not, this is a fact that this situation has brought us in this chaos. And nobody is talking about it. They're trying to overshadow it. And that's
She will answer the question.
Well, everybody's talking about it. I can guarantee. And I can tell you that your opinion is the same opinion of every country of the Sahel, because everybody says, for instance, the origin of all the problems at security level comes from Libya for the free circulation of weapons after 2011, many things that are recurring in the narrative. And it is true that Libya has not been able to control the situation. I organized recently an important conference in Tunis between the countries of the Sahel, the 5 countries of the Sahel, and Libya. Just to tell you how I am involved in these kind of things. So we talk about it very much. It was in November in Tunis, Libya, and the 5 countries of the Sahel, including Mali. And we had a very important discussion. I opened the conference with the Vice President of Libya, Al-Kuni. And Al-Kuni started his speech by saying, I want to excuse my country because we were not able to control the circulation of arms. And this has caused immense problems in the region. Just to give you an example. And this is 3 months ago, now I'm not good at maths, 5 months ago. And just to give you an example. So in fact, there is a lot going on, and the issue of Libya is very present in the mind of everybody, from the European Union to the countries of the Sahel to Libya itself, because Libya is, as you very well know, is not able to solve its problems at the moment.
I have a question here. To Stefan, the Initiative Africa Interactive. Thank you very much for your fascinating talk. I had recently the chance to hear your other conference here in Vienna, and there you made a point which I found very important in terms of creating this new, looking for new forms of dialogue with Africa, and you stressed the role of culture. And I wonder if you could emphasize now a little bit about this role culture would play in bringing us an eye-to-eye level between the European Union and Africa?
Well, this is one of my personal battles, because I honestly think that unfortunately the Africans of the Sahel are excluded from the global debate at all levels. The image I give usually is, don't think that because people possess a mobile phone, that means that they are connected to the world. That is not true, because for the Africans it's very difficult to be connected, in particular in the Sahel, where there is no electricity, for instance, so no connection. Young people are not able really to participate in the global debate. And if I ask you, maybe you're all experts of Africa, but if I ask you some the names of novelists in the Sahel, very difficult that people know. But even researchers, academics, if you are an African academic, you might be lucky to publish a book, but your book will be put in the market at a cost of something like $200 to $300. Seriously. Nobody will read it, nobody will quote it, you will not be able to enter the system of academics exchanging ideas and so on. And this is, I think, a really despicable way of excluding populations without making it openly, because nobody really reflects on these aspects. These are forms of discrimination that are really vicious, but they don't appear clearly to anyone. So when I talk about culture, there are many vehicles. Our friend from Mali knows very well, there are singers that are gaining some visibility, for instance, in the Western world, and there is an exchange. But of course, this is still sort of, let's say, embryonic dimension. I strongly think that this could be a very important vehicle, because when we manage to bring the local culture to Europe, there is a very good response, and I think it could be a good way of enhancing our dialogue. Of course, when we talk about dialogue, what is the problem? It's conceptual. because our concepts are different from concepts of another country. This happens between Italians and Austrians, for instance, although we have built our own common beliefs and principles and so on. But there are things that make us different, which is richness, of course. Between the Sahel and the European Union, the language is different. The lifestyle is different. Sometimes we don't understand how important it is to respect and to put ourselves in the position of people, for instance, who live in the desert. When the people ask me about the Tuareg, I say, excuse me, I mean, people who are able to live in that condition, that kind of environment, they're very intelligent. Of course, because I don't think I would survive. Of course, you know, I've been in the desert, but for a short period of time. So we have to put ourselves in a different dimension. Not easy. Usually my formula is that we have to develop a Euro-African or African-European bidirectional language, which can be helped by the diasporas, because the diasporas are fantastic. They have already done this work. They have already managed to be bridges between two cultures. So I think that we should exploit all the resources at our disposal and develop this new language. And it is the time to do so, because if we want to bring a very crude argument, demography. Our concept of demography must be complementary. You know, demography is not a monster. Demography is important to understand that we will have fantastic new population composed of Sahelians who are very young, very capable, full of energy, human capital that we can, rely on. And this is a reality. We cannot hide this. What do we do with this human capital? We need it. Apart from anything, we all know. So we have to find ways of managing all this, because of course we have to manage it, but to make sure that this becomes part of our projects for the future, because the European Union needs projects at the moment. It needs projects to maintain its position of primacy in the world, which is now in a difficult situation.
One more question, please.
Thanks, Ambassador. Senora Del Re, Emil Brix. Thank you very much for your work and for your analysis today. I have two questions. First question is, what would be the impact, and it's unlikely, but what would be the impact if Donald Trump were elected president again, both to the EU and to Africa? Okay, you could answer that first, and then I'll ask the second question, please.
You think I am a magician? Well, actually, it's embarrassing in the sense that at the moment, I can see a clear strategy for Africa. You know that the Biden administration, they have put in place a strategy, this Fragility Act that is an act very interesting to help fragile countries to come out of their difficult conditions. So I see a strategy for the moment. I don't know whether Trump would continue in that road, because of course priorities change according to administrations. But I would say that this would not change anyway the priorities of Europe. At the moment, Africa is very important for Europe. We repeat it all the time. There are some countries, including Italy, I have to say, that insist on the importance of Africa in our strategy for the future. So whatever happens in the United States, I don't think that this would change. And in any case, consider that, as I said, the Americans have already started a lot of activities that I don't think, in case somebody else comes instead of Biden, would destroy in one moment, because these are important decisions that are taken at national level. And I think that when they are taken, they are also taken in the Congress. And the Congress, of course, comes to decisions that are out of consensus. They're not out of fractures within the groups.
I hope you're right. The other question is about Wagner Group. Since you're involved so much.
Not with the Wagner Group.
Not with them. Since we've heard so much about Wagner Group and what they're doing in Ukraine and Africa and other places, to what extent do you feel that Wagner Group equals Russia or equals Putin, and Putin to Russia equals Wagner Group? Because there seems to be some independence or some autonomy from the two. What's your perception of that? Thank you.
Yeah, and I mentioned that already, but I will go more deeply into it. I am convinced of the fact that, as I mentioned, there is a certain degree of independence in the sense that the Wagner Group is not even a registered group in Russia, which means that if, as I said before, if they behave well, of course, Russia can use it as an argument, positive argument. If they behave badly, Russia can distance itself from the group because they are not really part of the system. So it's an intelligent way of putting it, of course, considering that the Prigozhin is a very powerful man, but is also keeping its own independence because he knows that by using this important tool, and I have to tell you that even in Mali, they are a small group of mercenaries. They are not 50,000 people. They are a small group, but they can really have a huge influence on all the equilibria in the country and at the international level. So I tell you. But one thing I wanted to tell you about the Wagner Group, when I was studying it very carefully, and this is a concern, of course, at all levels, intelligence and all the rest, I was reflecting on the fact, going back to the issue of the centrality of the European Union, that, for instance, the Wagner Group is out of any kind of treaty that we have created. But when it comes to the regulations regarding private armies, there is an agreement at international level, but it has been signed only by 51 countries. This means that it's not a leading treaty, it's not a leading document because 51 countries out of 193 is not enough. So we have to rethink all this. We have to rethink our centrality and make sure that when we take decisions, these are decisions that are shared by everybody. Otherwise, they're not important. Russia is out of this document that regulates private armies, so they act the way they want. So you see, I don't know if I make my point clear. We need to revise our way of acquiring a centrality. It's not enough to tell the countries of Africa, you have to vote in favor of the UN resolution. That's not a strong argument anymore. We have to put it in another way. Of course, somebody will criticize me, but I am convinced that we need to develop a different language to pass our arguments to others.
Thank you. We still have one more, two questions. Yes, please.
The balance. Thank you for the insightful talk. My question is based on sovereignty. So, can we say that the Sahel efforts of new partners such as Russia and China as well as Turkey is a means of most countries in the Sahel to affirm their sovereignty, which has mostly been jeopardized because of aid conditionalities that have frequently, because of aid conditionality, they have frequently been subjected to the traditional partners. The second question is it possible to talk about partnership when one of the goals is being subjected to conditionalities?
Well, I think that in any kind of relationship, conditionality is normal, in the sense that, of course, if you are investing big sums of money or putting in place big projects, of course, you are entitled to make sure that your project is going to be implemented, that the money is going in the right pockets, and that the results are guaranteed, that there is a participation on the basis of contracts that are made, because you have to think that when we put money in a project, for instance, it doesn't come out of the blue. It's a long process. We have to decide what to do. We have together, usually. decide what to do, we have to make a project, we have to discuss the budget, we have to discuss the location, we have to discuss who are the partners, because all our projects, for instance, rely on local partners, because the beneficiaries must be the local communities. So it's a long process. And usually it's a process that is based on, normally and always, it's based on transparency. Meaning that every single penny is examined, it's counted, it's put in the proper economic system that guarantees that the project works. So when we talk about conditionality, we talk about the fact that, for instance, you have a conditionality regarding the length of the project, you have conditionality regarding what kind of results you want to obtain. And I think that this is legitimate in a partnership. Also, regarding other political things, our conditionality is the same conditionality, for instance, for Mali. I guess you are from Mali. No? We are from? Cameroon. Cameroon. My friend Fidelis is also from Cameroon. You know that conditionality at political level, in the case of countries where there has been a coup d'etat, regards for us the return to constitutional order. I think that it is a legitimate request. We are supported in this sense also by ECOWAS, which is the most important regional organization, which also wants to be able to have a legitimate government with which it can interact for the future, because it is important for us also to build on legitimate systems and especially legitimate leadership if you want to invest a lot of money. Imagine if today we have one president, the day after we have another president. It's very difficult for us to work in that sense. So this is the problem. Regarding sovereignty, once again, we are not in any case putting in doubt sovereignty. We never did that. In fact, we have interlocutions with the states. Of course, as I said, in case of coup d'etat, we are still interlocuting, but we would like to return to the constitutional order to make sure that there is a stability. But sovereignty has never been put in doubt by anyone.
Thank you. That's the last question. Yes, please.
Hi, so I'm very happy to know that you are regional, because I work with regional in a project in the region, and hopefully you work with industries and we see China's industry, but no Russian industries. And I would be very interested to know, as a donor, what are your focuses, your priorities for the next year in this region? I guess it's not only security and anti-terrorism, but I hope I would like to know that.
Thank you. Well, actually, I'm proud to say that the European Union is really active in all sectors. Of course, education is very important, and everybody says that education is very important. And consider that the level of education is very low. And we also have to add the fact that because of terrorism, an immense amount of schools have been closed down. In Mali, I don't know, Ambassador, how many schools have been closed down. I think it was about 3,000 because of terrorist attacks. So you can imagine how serious the situation is. Of course, we are putting ourselves at the disposal of the countries of the Sahel to reestablish as much as possible the educational system. Health is also a very important element. One thing that we would like is to help the countries of the Sahel to be able to produce medicines by themselves. We started, for instance, during the pandemic, when, of course, there was this huge problem of vaccines for the Sahelian populations. And of course, we started thinking that maybe we should help the countries to develop their own laboratories, because, of course, this would make a huge difference. We are working in the economic sector. I have to say it's very difficult. I always try to convince private investors to invest in the Sahel. Together with the team today, We discussed ways of attracting investments, but I told you, unfortunately, the narrative is killing the countries of the Sahel because everybody says it's too dangerous, it's impossible. And especially in the Sahel, you have also the problem of the quality of the products. We are ready to help. We have many projects in place, and also the exportability, the transformation of food, other things that for me are very, very relevant. I would say that in terms of volume of intervention and opportunities and the sectors, we are really doing a lot. Consider also that we work as European Union, but we also have many projects at bilateral level that fall under the umbrella of the European Union, because I'm talking about the 27 member states. It's incredible what people are doing in Mali, Burkina Faso. In Burkina Faso, there are, for instance, Italians, there are NGOs that have been working for 40 years, you know, really guaranteeing the survival of many communities and developing activities for instance, groups of women to create some form of income. And these are things that I consider particularly relevant, and I think that we have to continue. Absolutely, we have to insist. Probably we have to scale up. That is the big problem now. But in Mali and Burkina, the security problems are so big that, for instance, our personnel often is not allowed to go in dangerous areas, and this interrupts the relationship with local communities because, especially in development cooperation, we work face to face with the local communities. Regarding industries, very difficult to talk about industries in the Sahel. Nevertheless, there is hope because there are opportunities. Regarding the Chinese presence, it is true that I find that the fault of the Chinese industries is that they don't really build a middle class, in the sense that they go, they take their own personnel, they don't really train the local people, and this doesn't create the opportunity for the local population to develop the specific skills. So it's a system that must be revised completely. I think that this is a huge opportunity for the European Union to also share its experience. I am proud to say that the European Union anyway is really very supportive and confirms the need to invest all the time, not only because of security, but also because of the demography, because of the youth that needs to be capable of realizing its own lives, of course, be employed and also contribute to our own economies, because we work together for prosperity. It's as I said, it's a bidirectional benefit that we get from this partnership.
Thank you very much. I have to stop. I have to stop here. One more question. Yes, please.
Because we talked about terrorists and the problems in security, is that a euphemism for the Islamist groups like Boko Haram?
Sorry, I missed a euphemism for Boko Haram. Okay. No, there are many terrorist groups, unfortunately, in the Sahel. We can discuss the level of ideology in the groups. I'm not convinced that all the terrorist groups are really still very ideological. I think that, unfortunately, at the moment, that our friends from the region probably we can share this opinion. It's a real system of criminality and terrorism mixed together, which is very difficult to defeat. And this is why we really have to help the countries to fight against this phenomenon. Regarding Boko Haram, I tell you what the narrative is now. For instance, President Bazoum and many others of Niger, they actually say that Boko Haram is virtually defeated. Really controlled. They say that Boko Haram was incredibly dangerous, as you know. I also went to the Lake Chad, on the shores of the Lake Chad. I went on a pirogue that patrols the islands where the terrorists hide to see with my own eyes. And I can tell you that the phenomenon is still there. There are still terrorists from Boko Haram, but the phenomenon has been reduced very drastically because of the intervention, for instance, of the multinational international force that is acting in Chad and is composed of African soldiers. So as you can see, it's a very composite situation. Wherever you go, you find different conditions, different groups. What is most dangerous at the moment is the fact that because Burkina Faso is so in very strong difficulty in fighting against terrorism, some very dangerous groups are consolidating their presence in the north of the country, and they are starting to advance towards the south. And this is, in my view, something we have to keep under control very seriously, and we have to help the country to fight against it.
Thank you. We had a huge issue of questions here, and we had only one speaker. So I guess we mainly have to thank you for taking up all the questions. I apologize that we only have a European Union representative here and not including people from the continent. But I guess you heard her not only ambition, but also your empathy with the situation in the Sahel area. And also, and I think this is very heartwarming, that you really are convinced that the European Union member countries do want to upscale the efforts there.
Yes.
On the Austrian part, I can say, and you heard that 2 days in Vienna, that we are committed to this. Austria has no colonial tradition in the region, which might to a certain extent be helpful in a given situation. I guess your main work is something that is very difficult. Poverty reduction, and some people are criticizing us, the European Union, that we failed the poverty reduction in the last decades in the region. That is true, but it doesn't mean that it is not correct. And you are trying really to improve the situation in the region. I got the feeling from the talk here, she's not saying all this because we want to avoid aggression or only terrorist questions, but also really to improve the situation. Because when we talk about conditionality, Madame Del Re actually talked about giving a chance to people for a liberal life in a situation where they have a say in their political and social thing. And that's something we believe in the European Union. I'm sorry to say, even we have our moral ideas about how we think that is good for other parts of the world. And if you call it liberal colonialism, I'm afraid we have to accept that. But I think there is a fair chance that parts like Sahel zone can learn and can be sort of helped by our experience. We had an experience in Europe, which was not so easy as well. But I stop here because we want to support her work. And I hope that you got the feeling that also in this discussion, there's a lot of interest in what you do. You're not alone in this work, and if you need something also from the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna, please feel home here. But give our speaker a big round of applause.